Ask anyone to name a Pokemon, and right after Pikachu, they'd likely answer Charizard. The ever-presence of this mon is undeniable, and to some, a bit tiring, but there's no denying its impact on the series. Because of this, Zard has a whopping 36 cards to its name. An insane amount, but if you know anything about Charizard in the video games, you'll know that it wasn't very competitively viable until Gen 6 gave it some Megas. Does this change in the card game? Well, yes actually. Charizard wasn't viable till the 7th gen in that. Anywho, we got a lot of terrible cards to get through, so let's dive into the history of Charizard in the TCG. Let's start appropriately with the place where it all started, base set Charizard. This card is a 120 HP fire Pokemon that is a stage 2 and evolves from Charmeleon. It has a weakness to water and a resistance to fighting and a retreat cost of 3. Its Poke Power is Energy Burn. As long as you like during your turn, before you attack, you may turn all energy attached to Charizard into fire energy for the rest of the turn. This power cannot be used if Charizard is asleep, confused, or paralyzed. Its first and only attack is Fire Spin for 4 fire energy. It does 100 damage and states to discard 2 energy cards attached to Charizard in order to use this attack. From here on out, just assume all Charizard cards are fire Pokemon stage 2s and have a weakness to water and a resistance to fighting. I challenge you to name a more iconic Pokemon card, or a more sought after one for that matter, boasting the highest HP of a card at the time. An insane attack, an ability that made it so double colorless energy could be used for the energy cost. You're probably thinking,
that's pretty good, right?
Well, in that aspect, you'd be wrong. Being stage 2 is the start of this card's many problems. The lack of rare candy meant that you were taking a long ass time to get set up. And while you'd think the fact that DCE could be used to cover the energy cost, the lack of energy acceleration and the extreme prevalence of energy removal trainers, like super and little ol' regular energy removal, means that actually getting the energy on was way harder than it may seem. Not even getting into the fact that you have to discard both DCE after using your attack, if you were only using those to power up. That's why the best deck in the format, Haymaker, was primarily made up of single energy attackers, and the second best deck was Blastoise, so you can assume how well that went for our old Dragon Boy. And the fighting resistance may have helped with Hitmonchan, but didn't exactly help with Electabuzz once that got going. Combine that with Gust of Wind bringing up your Charmanders, which doesn't have that handy fighting resist, and plus power, meaning that it's probably going to get bopped in one turn, and you start to see just how stupid base set was. But more importantly, why this card didn't see a whole lot of serious competitive play. That's a running theme you'll see in this video, unfortunately. One that'll carry over into our next several cards, just like Charizard from Neo Premium File. Its Poke Power states, once per turn, before you attack, you may take up to 2 fire energy cards attached to other Pokemon and attach them to Charizard. This power cannot be used if Charizard is asleep, confused, or paralyzed. Its first and only attack is Fire Spin for 4 fire energy. It does 100 damage and states discard 2 energy cards attached to Charizard in order to use this attack. This card is Japanese exclusive and is bad, so we'll only be stopping here for a brief moment. It's basically just a worse base set Zard, not being able to use DCE to power up. Moving energy onto this thing is pretty pointless when it takes just as long to accelerate energy onto the field as it would if you were just to put it onto this Pokemon. Anyways, the card is trash. Moving on. Dark Charizard from Team Rocket has 80 HP, and its first attack is Nail Flick for 1 colorless energy. It does 10 damage. That's it. Its second attack, Continuous Flare Ball, for 2 fire energy, does 50 damage. It has a modifier that says flip the number of coins equal to the number of fire energy cards attached to Dark Charizard. This card does 50 damage times the number of heads. Discard a number of fire energy attached to Dark Charizard equal to the number of heads. So the first attack is trash, with doing 10 on a stage 2 being terabad. And the second attack would be cool if it wasn't on a coin flip, something that will, unfortunately, be seeing a lot of in this video. 80 HP on a stage 2 is some straight up garbo compared to the first card. It sucks for all the same lack of energy accelerating reasons that the first one did. They just made it even worse this time. Nice. Next up, we have Blaine's Charizard. It has 100 HP, and its first attack for 1 fire energy, Roaring Flames, does 20 damage, and has the modifier stating, discard all fire cards attached to Blaine's Charizard. If all energy cards attached to Blaine's Charizard provide 2 fire energy, discard all of them. This attack does 20 damage plus 20 more damage for each fire energy discarded this way. Its second attack, Flame Jet, costs 2 fire energy and states, flip a coin. If heads, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon. This attack does 40 damage to that Pokemon. Don't apply weakness and resistance to this attack. Any other effects that would happen after applying weakness and resistance still happen. Well, doing 40 for 1 energy is pretty good, but Jynx was doing the same for a DCE, so it's not great considering that with plus power, it could KO any of your basics in 1 turn. For the second attack, we see another coin flip, awesome, but instead of doing more damage, it maybe gives you the chance to attack.
Getting a package from the Yakuza tomorrow, and it's either going to be $70 million or enough anthrax to kill a small village. Might as well, it's a gamble, life's a gamble.
This kind of sealed this card's fate, but being a stage 2 and a meta less and less hospitable to them was the final nail in this coffin made of nails. There were fire decks running around, see Brock's Ninetales and Moltres for that, but this Zard definitely wasn't being played in them. Following that, we have Shining Charizard from Neo Destiny. It is a 100 HP basic with 1 attack, White Hot Flame, that does 100 damage and costs 3 fire and 2 lightning energy, and also states, discard 1 fire energy and 1 lightning energy attached to Shining Charizard, or this attack does nothing. Flip a coin. If tails, Shining Charizard will do 30 damage to itself. You can't have more than 1 Shining Charizard in your deck. Finally, a bit... What the hell is that? How the hell are you getting 3 fire energy and 2 lightning energy onto this thing before you get wrecked? Why does it do 30 damage to itself? Why do you have to discard 1 of each energy, making it even more cumbersome to power up? You can only have 1 Shining Charizard in your deck? How do you even build a deck around that? Why is there another goddamn coin flip? I suppose the real question is, why am I still talking about this? Legendary Collection was the same as base set, so whatever. Expedition Charizard, however, is a card with 100 HP. Its first attack, Tail Smash, does 40 damage for 1 colorless energy, and states flip a coin. If tails, this attack does nothing. Its second attack, Flamethrower, for 2 fires and 1 colorless, does 60 damage. It states discard 1 fire energy attached to Charizard. It only has 2 retreat this time. Well, that's something. It could be worse. The first attack would be really good if it wasn't on a stage 2 or on a coin flip. The second attack is pretty good, but you had basics like Entei and stage 1s like Scizor running around doing the same thing, so it just wasn't cutting it for the meta at the time. Would have arguably been good if it was printed in base set, but not after Gen 2 showed up to play. Wait, there's 2 of them? Zard's other card from the Expedition set has an HP of 120. It has a Pokepower, Burning Energy, that once per turn, before you attack, you may turn all of your basic energy attached to all of your Pokemon into fire energy for the rest of the turn. This power cannot be used if Charizard is affected by a special condition. Its first and only attack, Scorching Whirlwind, costs 4 fire energy and does 120 damage, and states, flip 2 coins. If one of them is tails, discard 2 energy attached to Charizard. If both are tails, discard all energy attached to Charizard. Now you may actually be shocked to hear this, but this card was pretty good at the time of release. Hitting for 120 is still bonkers good, even if it's on an attack with a coin flip. It still had options to get that energy on efficiently. Plus, the coin flip didn't actually interfere with the attack itself, just the energy put on the attacker. The Venusaur at the time worked great to get it powered up, and with energy removal and gusting being harder with the addition of Charizard's favorite thing, a coin flip, this card had a way easier time getting rolling than any of its previous lizardy brethren. It got good support from Porygon 2, like every deck at the time, along with Pokemon Fan Club to get your basics on the bench, as seen in Jason Kalzinski's deck here. It was probably one of the kookiest formats that the Pokemon TCG has ever seen, and nothing exemplifies that more than Charizard being one of the main attackers and one of the best decks in said format. Just shows that having the right cards around to back it up is sometimes more important than what's printed on the card itself. Finishing out Gen 2, we have Charizard from Skyridge. It has 110 HP and is a colorless type. Its Pokebody, Crystal type, states, whenever you attach a fire, electric, or fighting basic energy from your hand to Charizard, Charizard type, color, becomes the same as that type of energy until the end of the turn. Its first attack, Fire Blast, for 2 fire and 1 fighting, does 40 damage and states discard an energy attached to Charizard. Its second attack, Dragon Tail, for 1 fire, 2 electric, and 1 colorless energy, does 50 damage and states flip 2 coins. This attack does 50 damage times the number of heads. It also has a retreat of 4 for some reason. Just had to make it harder on this terrible card, did we? It's good that we're closing out the gen with Charizard being bad again. Its ability is just kind of weird, like situationally good, but switching up the typing by using your attachment for the turn is not as good as an ability that, say, attached the weird-ass energy that you needed to get on to attack. Speaking of the attacks, they're bad. The energy requirements mean that you'll desperately be trying to draw into the energy you need, and probably not getting it. You also have another attack with 3 disparate energy cost with a coin flip to determine if you actually get to attack, which, as we know, is a recipe for success. How is it so hard to understand? Coin flips that make you lose your turn are not going to make good cards. Moving on. To start off Gen 3, we have Charizard from EX Dragon. It has 120 HP, and its first attack, Collect Fire, for 1 fire and 1 colorless energy, does 30 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, search your discard pile for 2 fire energy cards and attach them to your Charizard, 1 if there's only 1. Its second attack, Flame Pillar, for 1 fire and 3 colorless energy, does 60 damage. You may discard 1 fire energy card from your Charizard. If you do, choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and do 30 damage to that Pokemon. Do not apply weakness and resistance for benched Pokemon. It only has a retreat of 2 this time, so that's something. Also, most of the cards in Gen 3 only have a retreat of 2, so keep that in mind, not that it's really gonna matter. With Pidgeot running around in this format, it's actually pretty bearable to be a Stage 2. Its first attack in the Firestarter Blaziken that was the new hotness, means that this card didn't even have too bad of a time powering up. But wait, what's that I see? Oh yeah, this attack's success is predicated on a coin flip, something the aforementioned Blaziken didn't have to worry about. This card likely didn't really see any competitive play because it didn't really excel in any area that other cards already didn't have covered. They all just did them slightly better, and this card just put an element of randomness on top of that. Solidly but let's move on. Next we have Charizard from Fire Red and Leaf Green EX. It has the EX rule, stating when a Pokemon EX is knocked out, your opponent takes 2 prize cards. It has 160 HP, and its Pokebody, Energy Flame, states, all energy attached to Charizard EX are fire energy instead of its usual type. Its first attack, Slash, for 3 colorless energy, does 50 damage. Its second attack, Burn Down, for 5 fire energy, does 200 damage, and states, discard 5 fire energy attached to Charizard EX. This attack's damage isn't affected by weakness, resistance, Pokepowers, Pokebodies, or any effects on the defending Pokemon. It also adds a weakness to Lightning, as if it wasn't already hard enough to be a Charizard card. This card may be the perfect example of an overkill Pokemon. 200 damage would one-hit KO any card in the game. And the ability it has, which is the same as the one it had from base set, means things like double colorless energy, or any energy accelerators, Gardevoir or Blaziken maybe, could help get this bad boy rolling. Plus, it would go through anything the opponent could put in its way to stop it. But that drawback, man. Discarding 5 energy is way too steep a cost. Plus, while being a Stage 2 is way more manageable with the welcome inclusions of Rare Candy and Pidgeot, it still means that you're setting up for at least 1 turn with your metaphorical pants down, while your Charmander is just sitting on the bench. The weakness to water was also not great, meaning one of the most popular decks, BLS, could bop you even more easily. Also, Raikou being in the format didn't really help either. That's not even mentioning what happens when he gets his ability turned off by Guardy, making him unable to use the only thing he's good for. For an EX, the risk-reward just isn't worth it, and the prospect of hitting a one-hit KO on every Pokemon quickly becomes impractical when you have to account for the situation around it. Into the I had potential pile you go. Moving swiftly along, we have Charizard from Crystal Guardians. It has 120 HP, and is a Delta species Pokemon, which we went over in the last video. It states this Pokemon is both Lightning and Steel type. Its Pokepower, Peal of Thunder, states once during your turn, when you play Charizard from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose as many energy cards as you like from there, and attach them to one of your Pokemon. Discard the other cards. Its first attack, for 1 lightning, 2 metal, and 1 colorless energy, Metal Burn does 120 damage, and states, discard all metal energy attached to Charizard. The ability is nice, giving Zard some much needed energy acceleration by way of a Baby End's Resolve, but the cost of a lightning and a steel is just way too cumbersome to be consistent. Being a Delta Pokemon gave it some neat tricks, the most valuable of which being real pretty. But, and say it with me, being a Stage 2 makes it tough to get rolling. The water weakness is annoying as hell given the aforementioned BLS, and discarding the metal energy is just the cherry on top of this downside sundae. Let's hope the best part of this card, the ability, is a sign of things to come. Next up is Charizard Star from Dragon Frontiers. It's a basic dark type with 90 HP and is a Delta species. Its first attack, Rotating Claws, costs a dark and a colorless energy and does 20 damage. And states, you may discard an energy card attached to Charizard Star. If you do, search your discard pile for an energy card, excluding the one you discarded, and attach it to your Charizard Star. Its second attack, for 4 dark and 1 colorless energy, Dark Swirl, does 50 damage. Discard all energy cards attached to Charizard Star, and discard the top 3 cards from your opponent's deck. You can't have more than 1 Charizard Star in your deck. It also brings the retreat cost back up to 3. Nice. Why are the shitty ones always the most expensive? Oh well, this one is straight up ass trash. The first attack is genuinely confusing to me, as discarding an energy to attach an energy to the active may be the most backward shit I've ever seen, and the second attack is laughably expensive. There's absolutely no way to pay this at the time, and you had to discard all the energy cards after attacking. Just to remind you, that's likely 5 valuable turns of your time just getting tossed down the drain. There must have been some monkey's paw where somebody asked for a basic Zard, but in return got one of the most unplayable cards. Oh, and you can't use more than one in a deck, meaning that even if you're insane enough to try to build a deck around this, you only get one shot at using any of its powerful attacks. Just wonderful. To round out Gen 3, we have Charizard from Power Keepers. It has 120 HP, and its first attack, Combustion, for 1 fire energy, does 30 damage. Its second attack, Bursting Inferno, for 2 fire and 2 colorless energy, does 50 damage, and states each defending Pokemon is now burned. 30 for 1 fire energy is pretty good all things considered, but 50 for 4 is just trash. The gimmick of burning both defending Pokemon was for double battles at the time, so now that the format has gone the way of the dinosaur and Game Freak's reputation, it's just a weirdly worded bad attack. What a fitting way for Charizard to end Gen 3, by taking a big old dump in its orange-colored pants. Moving on to Gen 4, we have Charizard from Secret Wonders. It has 130 HP and a Pokebody, Fury Blaze, which states, if your opponent has 3 or less prize cards left, each of Charizard's attacks do 50 more damage to the active Pokemon, before applying weakness and resistance. Its only attack, Blast Burn, does 120 damage for 4 fire and 1 colorless. It states, flip a coin. If heads, discard 2 energy attached to Charizard. If tails, discard 4 energy attached to Charizard. If you can't, this attack does nothing. The ability is pretty good for comeback potential, but oh boy that attack. It's Zard's old pal, the coin flip. Discarding 2 energy on a good day and kicking you back to square one if you flip tails. Why do they keep doing this? In a meta lacking energy acceleration, it was just way too cumbersome to use, so no one did. Next. Charizard from Stormfront has 120 HP and a Pokebody Energy Burn, which states all energy attached to Charizard are fire energy instead of their usual type. Its first attack, Fire Spin, for 4 fire energy does 100 damage and states discard 2 energy attached to Charizard. Its ability and attack are a really nice callback to its base set variant, with a nice upgrade of the attack, allowing you to just discard 1 DCE instead of making you discard both. It's still too cumbersome, and can you guess why? I'll give you a hint, it's because it's a stage 2. Discarding energy was actually pretty common amongst the best cards at the time, but just for a flat 100 damage really isn't worth it. Hey, at least it could hit weakness on Dialga, so that's something. And at least it can go down as underwhelming as opposed to offensively bad. No, get back, shoot, shoot! Charizard G from Supreme Victors is a 100 HP basic Pokemon. Its first attack, Flame Jet, for 1 fire and 1 colorless, states flip a coin. If heads, this attack does 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Its second attack, Heat Blast, for 1 fire and 2 colorless energy, does 50 damage. Hey, it's basic this time, and the first attack, well, that speaks for itself. And the second attack is just too much for too little return. Most of these G cards work more as a conduit to their level X counterparts. Too bad this one is just straight trash. Speaking of level X counterparts, we have Charizard G level X from Supreme Victors. It has 120 HP, is a level X Pokemon, and has the Pokepower Call for Power, which states, as often as you like during your turn, before you attack, you may move an energy attached to one of your Pokemon to Charizard Z. This power cannot be used if Charizard G is affected by a special condition. Its first and only attack, Malevolent Fire, costs 2 fire and 3 colorless energy and does 150 damage, and states, flip a coin. If tails, discard all energy attached to Charizard G. Being a level X, it can use any attack, Poke Powers, or Poke Body from its previous level. Not that that really'd help it a whole lot. So the ability is pretty good, allowing you to move energy from Pokemon that could accelerate it onto themselves to Zard. See something like Pachirisu. But the attack, yeah, this is a bad card. 150 damage is a lot, but the risk reward just isn't there. Sorry Zard, we're moving on. Charizard from Arceus. It's back to being Stage 2 and has 140 HP. Its Pokebody, Fire Formation, states, each of Charizard's attacks does 10 more damage for each Fire Pokemon on your bench to your opponent's active Pokemon, before applying weakness and resistance. Its first attack, Fire Wing, for 1 Fire Energy does 30 damage. Its second attack, Burning Tail, for 2 Fire and 1 Colorless, does 80 damage, and states, discard a Fire Energy attached to Charizard. This card's pretty okay actually. 80 for discarding 1 energy is pretty good, and adding 10 for each Fire Bench Pokemon makes this an attacking behemoth once you fill up that bench. Being a Stage 2 continues to be the bane of our fiery friend, but as a rogue deck, you could do a whole lot worse. Wow, I guess we'll mark this as a win for Charizard at the end of Gen 4. It's said that a card that could maybe work in a rogue deck is the best card Zard's had for 2 generations, but take what you can get, I suppose. Starting off Gen 5, with Charizard's only card from the gen, we have Charizard from Boundaries Crossed. It has 160 HP, and its first attack, Split Bomb, for 1 Fire and 2 Colorless, states, this attack does 40 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Its second attack, Scorching Fire, for 1 Fire and 4 Colorless Energy, does 150 damage, and states, discard a Fire Energy attached to this Pokemon. 160 HP, a pretty great first attack, a very usable second attack, what's basically a lesser drawback Fire Blast, and does 150 damage. These all seem like pretty appealing things at first glance, but don't be tricked, this card still isn't great. Being a Stage 2 continues to be the Achilles heel of this mon. Blastoise not only dominating at the time, but it also only needed 1 Stage 2 to get rolling. Charizard likely can't get moving and grooving without 2, its partner likely being Emboar in itself. This dude just kept getting reprinted all throughout Gen 5, and it would be Zard's lone card for the generation, and, well, initially interesting, it's pretty disappointing all things considered. Next up on our tour is the Land of Mega Evolutions, Gen 6. Charizard had a cavalcade of cards come out all in the same set, so we're gonna go over the 2 regular EXs first, and then the 2 Megas. Wow, it's almost like Game Freak has a bias or something. Where's the love for my man Maractus over here, huh? Charizard EX from Flashfire, the first one, is a 180 HP basic. Its first attack, Stoke, costs 1 colorless energy, and states, flip a coin. If heads, search your deck for up to 3 basic energy cards and attach them to this Pokemon. Shuffle your deck afterwards. Its second attack, Fire Blast, for 1 Fire and 3 colorless energy, does 120 damage, and states, discard an energy attached to this Pokemon. This card reads mostly as a conduit for its Mega Evolution, so this will be quick. Stoke would be amazing if it wasn't on a goddamn coin flip.
You can't keep getting away with it!
And Fire Blast is just ho-hum, so on to the next. The second Charizard EX from Flashfire has 180 HP and is also a basic. Huh, great minds think alike, I guess. Its first attack, Wing Attack, costs 3 colorless energy and does 60 damage. Its second attack, Combustion Blast, costs 2 fire and 2 colorless energy and does 150 damage, and states, this Pokemon cannot use Combustion Blast during your next turn. This card is actually pretty good. With its meaty attack of 150 that would hit for weakness on that pesky Virizion, the drawback of not being able to attack next turn is totally manageable, with the other attacker likely waiting in the wings to tag you out next turn. This is something future cards would show to be a great drawback for big attacks, like Buzzwole GX and another card we'll be talking about later. This card was so good that it actually got teched into a sizable amount of Worlds decks, including, and my pronunciation sucks, I know, I'm sorry, Diego Casariga from Worlds 2014, and Tito Santoso from Worlds 2015. Overall, a really solid card and a great tech choice in a lot of Firebox decks. The Megas, on the other hand, well, the first Mega Charizard card from Flashfire has 220 HP and the Mega Evolution rule, which states when one of your Pokemon becomes a Mega Evolution Pokemon, your turn ends. Its first and only attack is Crimson Dive. For 2 fire and 3 colorless energy, it does 300 damage, and states this Pokemon does 50 damage to itself. It only has 1 retreat, so that's pretty good. Crimson Dive would actually be really great with Blacksmith, with 300 one-hit KOing everything under the Poké Sun. But note that one thing on the card. Yeah, the Mega Rule basically made all Mega Pokemon unplayable, as the Mega Evolution ending your turn without you getting a chance to attack is such a bad drawback that literally no one tried to make a deck with them. Well, I mean, people tried, but they weren't very successful. That was until Spirit Links were introduced, allowing Pokemon to Mega Evolve and not burn a turn. The problem? Charizard got its Spirit Link in Evolutions. You know, the set that comes 2.5 years after this one. Because of this, none of these Megazards could feasibly see any play. Spoilers, sorry. And were relegated to looking cool and carrying the torch of the many Zards before them, that being one of complete unplayability. And spoilers, when the Zard did get a Spirit Link, Seismitoad made sure it was seeing exactly 0 play. Let's humor ourselves and look at the next Mega Charizard EX from Flashfire. It has 230 HP, and the Mega Evolution rule. Its first and only attack, Wild Blaze, for 2 fire, 1 dark, and 2 colorless energy, does 300 damage, and states, discard the top 5 cards of your deck. The retreat's back bumped up to 3, so, you know, good stuff all around. Ooh, a Dragon type. That's pretty neato. Wild Blaze, while being insanely powerful, just has a really weird energy cost to get powered up. And it'd be a while till Double Dragon Energy came around to fix that problem. Oh yeah, the stuff I said about the last Megazard also applies too. You know, the part about being completely unplayable without Spirit Link? Way to screw over a potentially interesting card, Pokemon Company. I thought you guys liked jerking off Charizard. Maybe the guy in charge of Spirit Links was just tired of all the Charizard pushing. I don't know. Next up we have X and Y Promo 17, Charizard EX. Its first attack, Mega Ascension, for 1 fire and 1 colorless, states, search your deck for a Mega Charizard EX, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards. Its second attack, Brave Fire, for 1 fire and 3 colorless energy, does 120 damage, and states this Pokemon does 30 damage to itself. This card is bad. The first attack is a couple of words from making this card great, and making its Megas megally competitive. As if it allowed you to put the Megazard on top of your Zard for the attack, it'd be great use of your second turn attack. Well, not great, but way better than putting a card that ends your turn into your hand, where it's probably just going to be end away anyway. Also, the second attack is bad, with 4 energy for 120 being and you damage yourself? Yeah, I think I'll pass. Generations brought us a bunch more Charizard cards, starting out with Charizard EX. It's a 180 HP basic Pokemon, whose first attack, Flame Cloak, costs 1 fire and 1 colorless energy. It does 30 damage and states, attach a fire energy card from your discard pile to this Pokemon. Its second attack, Burning Breath, costs 2 fire and 2 colorless energy, and does 80 damage, and adds, flip 2 coins. This attack does 40 more damage for each heads. The first attack is pretty okay. It allows you to get powered up, and while the second attack has Charizard's old friend, a coin flip, it only really improves the attack with each heads, and doesn't make the attack reliant on it. So it's kind of a coin flip done right, if you can do them right. A thoroughly mediocre card though, especially when you have the good Flashfire EX that you could be running instead. And it's only 10 less than this card after it gets 2 heads. But that's not all. We also have another Mega that can't be viable in the set it came out in. Let's explore that again. Generations Mega Charizard EX. It has 220 HP, and the Mega Evolution rule. Its first and only attack, Heat Typhoon, costs 1 fire and 3 colorless energy, and does 100 damage with the modifier of Flip a Coin for each fire energy attached to this Pokemon. The attack does 50 more damage for each heads. Honestly, it's just not as good as the last 2 cards that came out, both of which, let me remind you, are still unusable. hitting for 300 as opposed to maybe hitting for 300 is always going to be preferable. The card relies on a coin flip to rack up its damage. The only generations in this set is that it's generating a lot of shit Charizard cards, am I right? Unfortunately, Generations wasn't done printing bad Charizard cards quite yet. The final non-GX Zard from this set has 160 HP, returns to being a Stage 2, and its first attack for 1 colorless energy, Recall, states, choose one of your Pokemon's attacks from its previous evolutions, and use it as this attack. Its second attack, Combustion Blast, for 2 fire and 2 colorless energy, does 100 damage, and states, this Pokemon can't use Combustion Blast during its next turn. With things like Evo Soda helping give evolution decks a fighting chance in the land of basic EXs, being Stage 2 is a lot more tolerable than it used to be. Combustion Blast, however, is not worth your time to get rolling. 100 damage just isn't strong enough for 4 energy, and if you're only looking for damage for 4 energy, you're likely just going to want to go with the Zard EX that we talked about earlier. The first attack is where things start to get interesting though. Being able to use any of your previous form's attacks for 1 colorless is potentially bonkers good, but only if the attacks below are worth using. So let's talk about them, shall we? Charmander from Generations has 1 attack, Playful, for 1 fire and 1 colorless energy. It does 20 damage and has the multiplier stating, flip a coin. If heads, this attack does 20 damage times the number of damage counters on this Pokemon. Playful is good in late game scenarios where you have a lot of damage on, or rather it would be if it wasn't on a goddamn coin flip. In a situation where you have enough damage counters on to make this attack worth it, the idea that you'll only potentially be doing 20 damage is enough to swear anyone not named Will off this attack forever. The Charmeleon from this set has 2 attacks, the first of which is Call for Support. It costs 1 colorless energy and states, search your deck for a supporter card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards. Its second attack, Slash, for 2 fire and 1 colorless energy, does 80 damage. Slash is potentially good for 80 damage for 1 colorless, allowing you to potentially hit 180 damage over 2 turns, with the 1-2 punch of Slash and Combustion Blast. Call for Support, however, is a waste of your turn, and it's fairly likely that that card's just going to get end away the next turn. Overall, the collection of cards could be a lot worse, but it's probably not worth using unless you're a hardcore Charizard fan, or you just like the art, like me, as there are plenty of strategies that just flat out overshadow it. Moving on to evolutions, we finally get our hands on Charizard Spirit Link. Yay! Except for the fact it's way too little too late at this point. People have moved on to cooler, shinier things. And even though they've reprinted the good EXs and the best Mega, in my opinion, people just still don't care. There was a new card in this set, however. Well, if you'd like to call this new. Charizard from Evolutions has 150 HP and is back to being a Stage 2. Its ability, Energy Burn, states, all energy attached to this Pokemon are fire energy, instead of their usual type. Its first and only attack, Fire Spin, for 4 fire energy, does 200 damage, and states, discard 3 energy attached to this Pokemon. Yeah, it looks pretty familiar, right? However, this card is coming out at a very different time from good old base set Zard, and the main reason that the card was ass trash in the first place, Energy Denial and the slow pace of Stage 2s, are way harder and way easier to do now, respectively. This card still struggled because there were just too many things that outclassed it, and too many ways to have your strategy of getting 200 damage off go awry. With the ever-popular Garbodor and its Garbotoxin making everyone's abilities go bye-bye, that just meant you couldn't really rely on DC to help you cover the energy cost. The problem with Charizard is that they just made it too weak. 200 damage isn't really going to KO any Mega Pokemon that is going to be staring down your path, as they pretty much all have HP in excess of 200. And things only got harder when GXs got introduced and broke through the HP ceiling. In addition to these cards, Charizard wouldn't be able to knock out most EX Pokemon when they have a Fighting Fury belt attached. And when you need to put 4 energy on a Stage 2, you likely need to be one-hit KOing everything in the meta just to be considered a relevant card. Sorry Zardy, looks like you're ending Gen 6 by showing that old dogs really can't learn new tricks. Flying over to Alola, we have the first Charizard GX. It has 250 HP and is a Stage 2. Its first attack, Wing Attack, does 70 damage for 3 colorless energy. Its second attack, Crimson Storm, for 3 fire and 2 colorless energy, does 300 damage, and states, discard 3 fire energy from this Pokemon. Its GX attack, Raging Out, for 1 fire and 3 colorless energy, states, discard the top 10 cards of your opponent's deck. You can't use more than 1 GX attack in a game. Other than the crazy expensive variants of this card, every aspect of this card is just piss poor. 300 for 5 energy is just terrible, seeing as Welder was but a glimmer and unbroken bonsai. Also, just like in the games, Wing Attack is a joke. The GX attack also leaves something to be desired, as milling is probably not your main objective in this deck, as if it is, you've probably got bigger problems than the ineffectiveness of this card. This card welcomes Zard back to the Stage 2 life, meaning that it's even less desirable to use than the EXs of yesteryear. I know I said Gen 7's where Zard gets good, but its first outing would absolutely not lead you to believe that. Next up, we have Charizard from Dragon Majesty. It has 160 HP, and its ability, Resolute Flame, states, this Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon for each of their Pokemon GX and Pokemon EX in play. As 1 attack, Fiery Blast, for 2 fire and 1 colorless that does 130 damage, and states, discard an energy from this Pokemon. While this card could potentially hit some crazy numbers, 280 for 3 energy on a non-GX, potentially, hitting for that was entirely dependent on your opponent, which is really never a good thing. All it takes is your opponent not benching their GXs just to cut your attack down to size. This card's situational attack and cumbersome setup had a lot of people saying, hey, that might be good, only for it to disappear from players' thoughts as soon as it arrived. The next card is Charizard from Team Up. It has 150 HP and an ability, Roaring Resolve, which states, once per turn before you attack, you may put 2 damage counters on this Pokemon. If you do, search your deck for up to 2 fire energy and attach them to this Pokemon. Then, shuffle your deck. Its only attack, Continuous Blaze Ball, for 2 fire energies, does 30 damage, and has the modifier that states, discard all fire energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 50 more damage for each card you discard in this way. Right off the bat, this card has some insane damage potential. And unlike our last card, it's all dependent on how many energy you can stack onto this card. Luckily, with cards like Welder, Giant Hearth, and Fire Crystal, along with the cavalcade of fire support that was brought to us in this set and the following set, you can hit numbers that would make even the beefiest boys feel a bit nervous when facing you down. Its ability is something that Zard cards have been longing for ever since the first card in base set, to the point where I'm confused why they've never had one like it before. No, not you. Get out of here. You can pretty much always hit for 180 at least, making this the first card where discarding the energy was absolutely worth the cost of admission. While this deck didn't set the world on fire, it still was a fantastic road deck, and even made an appearance at Worlds piloted by Jimmy Watts, getting 92nd with a Chandelure deck of all things. Props to him for making that work. Don't let the lack of placements dissuade you, however. If you sleep on this card, you'll find your Mewtwo and Mew getting Continuous Blaze Balled into oblivion. Okay, back to what Charizard does best, having multiple cards in a set and having them all suck noodles. For this foray into that, we'll be talking about both Detective Pikachu cards together, because they're both terrible and the card artwork will give me nightmares if it stays on screen too long. First up for the non-GX, it has 180 HP, and its first attack, Slash, for 1 fire and 2 colorless energy, does 70 damage. Its second attack, Wild Tackle, for 1 fire and 3 colorless energy, does 180 damage, and states, this Pokemon does 50 damage to itself. The promo GX in this set, however, has 250 HP, and its first attack, for 1 fire energy, is Raging Destruction, which states, discard the top 8 cards of your deck. If any of those are fire energy, attach them to this Pokemon. Its second attack, Steam Artillery, does 200 damage and costs 2 fire and 3 colorless energy. Its GX attack, Dreadful Flames, costs 2 fire and 3 colorless energy and does 250 damage, and states, discard an energy from each of your opponent's Pokemon. You can't use more than 1 GX attack in a game. The GX's first attack is just an End's Resolve on Bath Salts, and the idea of using that after you've evolved your Charizard is absolutely not worth your time. Unless you're using some kind of weird variant of bird control to mill through your deck faster. But hearing that probably made you lose brain cells just from the thought of that strategy. 200 for 5 energy is fine, I guess. It's not really even that good. And 250 for 5 on a GX is almost insulting, honestly. Joining its slightly less stinky brother in the trash pile is our non-GX counterpart for this set, because there just weren't enough Charizard cards printed, were there? Slash is terrible for 3 on a stage 2. I shouldn't have to tell you at this point why it's wild that Wild Tackle got printed on this card in the first place. The entirety of the Detective Pikachu set was pretty bad, barring this froggy boy, and these are 2 of the worst defenders in there. And looking at their weird amorphous lizardy bodies for any longer is likely to cause both you and I a lot of long-term mental scarring. So let's move right along. Next up, we have Charizard's foray into tag team cards with Reshiram and Charizard from Unbroken Bonds. It's a basic that has 270 HP, and its first attack, Outrage, for 1 fire and 1 colorless, does 30 damage. With the modifier, this attack does 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. Its second attack, Flare Strike, for 3 fire and 1 colorless energy, does 230 damage, and states, this Pokemon can't use Flare Strike during your next turn. Its GX attack, Double Blaze GX, for 3 fire plus, does 200 damage plus the modifier if this Pokemon has at least 3 extra fire energy attached to it, in addition to this attack's cost. This attack does 100 more damage, and this attack's damage isn't affected by any effects of your opponent's active Pokemon. You can't use more than 1 GX attack in a game. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. This card is straight up fantastic. Attack number 1 is great for when you've used the second attack and can't pivot out of the active. And the second attack is flat out the best attack any Charizard has had on it to date. 230 is such a relevant number, especially when paired with Choice Band when they were still legal with each other. Its GX attack is an extremely effective nuke that lets you hit a one-hit KO on pretty much any Pokemon if you have the extra energy attached. I meant Pokemon GX. No, shoot. Welder also made it so you could always get Flare Strike rolling on turn 2. And the aforementioned fire support really helped make this deck a consistency beast. Even though you often see Charizard paired with red, it was green that made a fantastic partner with this card, giving it incredible searching access to its entire deck almost. But this card was too good just to be running one kind of strategy. There are variants relying on abilities of other great fire Pokemon like Heatran, and other great support Pokemon like Dene and Jirachi. It also works as a great partner for Mew Mew, which would normally run fire energy, and Flare Strike was just that good of an attack. This attack was in so many decks and it did so well at some of the biggest events around the globe that I'm only going to mention the first place finishers, excluding Worlds where we'll have a look at the top 8. And also again, sorry if I butcher your name with any of my Midwestern tendencies. Ryoya Kanagawa from Champion League Kyoto. Kion Amini from the Santa Clara Regional, playing a Greens variant. Pablo Menza from the Sao Paulo Regional. Hei Donjeong from the Korean League Final. And then at Worlds, Charizard came out in force, with the winner Henry Brand using it in his Mew Mew deck. And the third place finisher, Blaine Hill, using a Greens variant. The fourth place finisher, Tord Reklev, using a Firebox variant. And the sixth place finisher, Pablo Venchez Barrera, using a Greens variant. Following Worlds, Reshiram didn't even slow down, with João Pedro Medeiros Zambrano winning the Champanes special event, and our main man Tord Reklev winning the Cologne Regional with a Mew Mew variant. Arandre Caporari Baraga won the Santiago special event with a Greens variant. Robin Schultz won the Sao Paulo International with a Firebox variant. Kaiwin Kabi won the Singapore special event with a Tectum Mew Mew, and David Cito Geldes won the Iquique special event in a Mew Mew tech. Yeah, remember, those are only the winners. Look below that and see the deck dominating the top 8s as well. The amount of Mew Mews also shouldn't take away from its achievements. It only illustrates the fact that this card was played in a lot of different ways at a very competitive level. This card continues to be amazing, finally giving our old Dragony pal a truly wonderful card to its name. I guess all you had to do is team up with a legendary, so it might be the Reshi half of this Reshizard, pulling most of the weight. Next up we have Charizard GX from Hidden Fates. It's a 250 HP Stage 2, with a first attack, Flamethrower, costing 2 fire and 2 colorless energy, doing 140 damage. Its GX attack, Flare Blitz GX, costs 2 fire and 2 colorless energy, and does 300 damage, and states you can't use more than 1 GX attack in a game. When you first look at this card, it seems pretty bad. It's a Stage 2 that hits for almost 100 damage less, with the same energy cost as its basic tag team counterpart, Yeah, I think I'll pass. Most of the cards introduced in Hidden Fates were pretty bad, and came from the family set over in Japan, and that the US knew was hot garbage, so they said, throw some shiny Pokemon in there, people will buy it anyways. And you nerds ate it up. What am I saying? So did I. However, this card sees a ton of play, and not because of what it can do in a vacuum, but because Mew Mew sees that 300 damage GX for 4 energy and starts salivating. It can just throw it in the discard pile and not have to worry about its stinky stage 2-ness, and can subsequently take down any GX that's not protected from this damage. And because this is the GX attack of choice in most Mew Mew variants, you see a lot of placements, so many in fact that I'm gonna have to cap it to first place finishes again. Yes, really, for this card, I know. Tord Reklev won the Clone Regional, Azul Garcia Grigre won the Atlantic City, New Jersey Regional, Daniel Altavilla won the Knoxville, Tennessee Regional, Kaiwen Kababe won the Singapore Special Event, Matthew Burris won the Brisbane Regional, David Soto Geldes won the Iquique Special Event, and Brent Tonnyson won the
Kuala Lumpur
Regional. Just shows sometimes you need a little help from our friends, or in this case, let our friends discard us and take our lunch money. For our final stop on this journey, we have another tag team card with some another fan favorite Pokemon. Braixen and Charizard GX is a 270 HP basic tag team Pokemon. Its first attack, Brilliant Flare, does 180 damage and costs 3 fire and 1 colorless energy, and states, you may search your deck for up to 3 cards and put them into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. Its GX attack, Crimson Flame Pillar, for 1 fire plus, states, attach 5 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way you like. If this Pokemon has at least 1 energy attached to it, in addition to this attack's cost, your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned and confused. It also has the tag team rule, stating that when a tag team is knocked out, your opponent takes 3 prize cards. This card was immediately intriguing to a lot of players in the TCG community. 180 plus, what's basically a Steven's Resolve without the use of a supporter, seems bonkers busted. Plus, while the GX attack isn't anything special, the main attack and the support around fire Pokemon made this card look like a dream come true for a lot of control players. The problem is that it gets shut down hard by Reset Stamp, leaving you with just a mediocre attack done to your opponent. And a lot of people would have preferred just the raw attacking power of Reshizard over this, making it hard to run a deck devoted to this card alone. Plus, with Mallow and Lana running around, healing everybody for 120, it's likely that it's going to be pretty hard for you to get a 2-hit KO consistently with just this card. But you know what doesn't care about the reduced attack and loves the ability to search 3 cards?
Surprise, motherfucker!
Yep, Mew Mew loves the ability to dish out damage while setting up for its next turn, so it sees plenty of play amongst its Psychic-type friends. But before I go into all the Mewtwo and Mew decks that pop this bad boy in, let's take a moment to honor the innovators that tried the pure variants first. Daniel Abramovici got 23rd at the Sao Paulo Regional. Jonathan Rodriguez got 49th at the San Diego, California Regional, with a Reshizard variant, but keeping it in the family, so that counts. Afia Samsudin got 11th at the Kuala Lumpur Regional. Now, because this sees a lot of play in Mewtwo, I'm gonna have to cut this down to first placers again. Kaiwen Kabebe won the Singapore Special Event, Matthew Burris won the Brisbane Regional, David Soto Geldes won the Iquique Special Event, and Brent Tonnyson won the Kuala Lumpur Regional. Keep in mind that this card has only been out for a couple of months, so it's anyone's guess on how good it will be once Sword and Shield rolls to our shores. Needless to say, it was a strong ending for a strong generation for Charizard. So going through all these cards, it really seems like the Pokemon Company really didn't have any idea of what to do with Charizard in the card game until very recently. They knew they wanted to make it a powerful attacker with drawbacks to its gameplay, but they couldn't find the right balance. Always leaning way too hard into the screw you for even playing this card kind of drawbacks. Cycling through discarding energy, coin flips, damaging itself, but finding its most consistently good cards and the ones that couldn't use their attacks after doing them, but leaving destruction in the turns that they did use it. So will Charizard be good in the future? Well, he's in Sword and Shield, so we'll definitely be seeing more of him. But whether or not the man who had a massive hate boner for this Pokemon and made it consistently awful for nearly 6 whole generations has been fired, remains to be seen. All I know is that if they make me flip another coin on a Charizard card, I think I'm gonna lose it. Thanks for watching.